Good day. GE with a word here. The message today is for all who are facing very large problems. Right now, I personally am most aware of the huge, horrible, disastrous problems that the people of Western North Carolina are facing in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Lost homes, lost vehicles, lost tools, barns, equipment, lost precious personal items, pictures, letters, deeds, and on and on and on, and lost loved ones. But it's also for any of us who may be facing very large problems of any nature: health, finances, jobs, relationships, or one of 1,000 other things. This is for you. This is for you if you're facing what I call a monster time. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 7 through 10, Paul had what to him was a very serious problem. Most scholars believe it was his eyes. I simply do not know. I do know that from living with my loving, legally blind wife, that eyes and eyesight are serious. Whatever our huge problems, it's always a monster to us. Whatever Paul's problem was, the question is, how did he face and handle it? The answer is the same for all of us, no matter what the problem. So let's examine what was going on, how it was handled, and the solution. We look first at Paul's thorn in the flesh from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 to begin with. Paul writes, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." Now, I think this thorn in the flesh was given to Paul for at least two reasons. First of all, because of the situation that existed with Paul. Paul seems to have been on the verge of being worshipped by others or exalting himself, and to him, that was a monster. He did not want that. And so it was the situation that existed with Paul that brought about this. It became his thorn in the flesh. But it was also to bring about God's situation with Paul. God wanted Paul in the position to serve him to the utmost. God wanted him to be his servant. Understand that Paul's thorn bothered him. It was his monster, and his thorn in the flesh had a purpose. So does yours. And no, most likely someone else cannot tell you that purpose. Then we turn to Paul's prayers. He says in verse 8, "For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, 3 times, that it might depart from me." What did Paul do? Did he moan, groan, complain, quit? No, he went to the Lord, and that's the right place to go. Paul went straight to the Lord with his monster problem. And then he quit asking when he got the answer. A reasonable amount of time, a reasonable amount of prayer, but it was the right time to stop. You know, sometimes even with God's answer to us, we don't know when to quit. We keep trying to tell God what to do. But Paul handled his problem the right way. And then we come to God's answer to Paul. And in verse 9, we read these words. "And he," this is God speaking, "he said unto me, My grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness." And then Paul responds, "Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ might rest upon me." God showed Paul two things. First of all, God's grace. Listen to this. God's grace is sufficient for any and all situations. Let me tell you something. I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. I can walk into any church in the United States, and ask the question to the congregation, who has a serious problem, a monster problem? There will be several hands to go up, maybe a bunch. I can point to just one of those who raise their hand and ask the congregation, how many of you in this congregation believe that God can take care of whatever this person's problem is and give them peace? Do you know what will happen? Just about every hand in the church will go up. You see, our problem is not believing that God can handle any and all situations. It's believing that he can handle my problem, my situation, my monster. And then we see the second thing that God showed Paul. God's grace is sufficient for any and all situations, and then God's strength is manifested in our weaknesses. It's up to you to find the strength. And let me tell you, it's not you, it's God. God always answers our prayers, but not always the way we want or expect. And you know what? That's a good thing. Fortunately, over the years, God has not answered many of my prayers like I wanted them to. His way was best. Then we come to the results. Verse 10. He says, therefore I take pleasure, Paul says, therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Here are two results, two truths. First of all, Paul found peace within his problem. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy. It's not always easy to find peace within our problems. And also, Paul found strength in his weakness. There are always good results when we find peace in God's will. Listen, my friend, how you and I handle our monster problems decides who and what kind of person we are. Some people get mad. Some people get drunk or drugged up. Some people go on spending binges. Some drop into hopelessness. Some get violent. Some try to ignore everything. None of these is the right way. A question that is often asked of pastors is this: why did God let this happen? It may have been a death, sickness, loss, disaster, whatever. And let me tell you, no pastor on earth has a specific answer for that question. Maybe God's trying to turn us around. Maybe he's stopping something worse. Maybe he is chastising his children. I just do not know sometimes. Whatever the reason, it's God's reason, and you can trust God. How we handle our challenges, our monsters, is a matter of our faith. Go to God. May God bless and guide you this day and in those to come.